At the awards ceremony, Ethan Carter disregarded his marital status and ran toward the stage to welcome the rising star. Bella White. The entire internet exploded. To prevent him from being labeled a homewrecker, Ethan proposed a fake divorce. He said that, if it hadn't been for Logan Reed pushing me away that year, I would have been the one who died on set. He was only fulfilling Logan's last wish, taking care of his fiancée. You understand me, don't you? Over the years, Bella slowly became Ethan's bottom line. In my past life, when I first heard those words, I completely lost it. I screamed, threw a fit, and refused to divorce him no matter what. My stubbornness pushed me to the brink until I was so consumed by rage that I developed cancer. Yet Bella, without a hint of remorse, simply looked at me and told Ethan, "She looks pretty healthy to me." That was when Ethan convinced himself that I was only holding onto this marriage out of sympathy for Logan. To force me into signing the divorce papers, he even went as far as to accuse me of having an affair with my manager, Ryan Moore. Only then did I finally realize, after years of him taking care of her, his heart had already shifted toward Bella. In the end, utterly broken and hopeless, I chose to end my life. Now that I had been given a second chance, I grabbed the divorce papers and signed them without hesitation. Let's separate for now. Once this scandal blows over, we can get back together. Okay? I leaned against the leather sofa in the living room, staring blankly out the window. Ethan walked up to me, Bella following closely behind him. Just yesterday, at the awards ceremony, Bella won the Best New Actress award. Yet the moment she stepped off the stage, Ethan, Hollywood's best actor, hurried over to welcome her like an eager fan. Marketing accounts immediately spun the story into a full-blown scandal. Netizens accused Bella of being a homewrecker, the woman who destroyed my marriage. Ethan's carefully cultivated image as the perfect husband collapsed overnight, and the ratings of his latest drama plummeted. In my past life, when Ethan handed me the divorce papers, I was so furious that I smashed the limited edition perfume he had given me. I screamed at him, demanding to know what exactly was going on between him and Bella. Bella was supposed to be nothing more than the fiancée of his savior. There were countless ways he could have taken care of her, yet, he chose to sacrifice our marriage, just to protect her reputation. But Ethan didn't know. During the worst of the online harassment, I got so stressed that I developed cancer. Sophia. Ethan's voice pulled me back to reality. I stared at the divorce papers on the coffee table as he sat down beside me. Those mesmerizing eyes, ones that had captivated countless fans, gazed at me intently. He gently took my hand, his voice soft, as if he were comforting a frightened animal. Think of it as repaying me, okay? We can tell the public that our relationship had been falling apart for months. That we've been living separately, just waiting for the right time to announce it. I didn't respond. Beside him, Bella stood in a champagne-colored evening gown, draped in Ethan's suit jacket. Her face was deathly pale, and her eyes were red from crying. Sophia, please, help us. I've already lost my fiancé. And now, my reputation is about to be ruined too. Sis, I'll get on my knees if I have to. She barely finished speaking before actually attempting to kneel. Ethan swiftly stood up and caught her, pulling her into his arms protectively. He looked down at her, his face filled with distress. Don't do this, Bella. Bella let out a sob, her voice soft and pitiful. I'm sorry, I just wanted to apologize to Sophia. Ethan's expression darkened. When he turned back to me, the tenderness from moments ago was gone. Sophia, this isn't up for discussion. I've already made up my mind. If you refuse to cooperate, don't blame me for what happens next. I met his gaze, calm and steady. He stopped mid-sentence, but I knew exactly what he wanted to say. Sophia, you know how much influence I have in the entertainment industry. I have 100 ways to make you sign this paper. If I leak the right rumors to the media, you won't survive the backlash. That was exactly what he had done in my past life. Back then, fabricated photos of me and Ryan in bed surfaced online, showing so-called intimate evidence. Overnight, I became a shameless, scandal-ridden disgrace. Meanwhile, Ethan and Bella played the victims, acting like I was the one who had wronged them. I consign, but on one condition. After a long silence, I finally spoke. Ethan lifted his eyes and met mine. Then, he nodded. He handed me the pen. I took it, my face expressionless, and signed my name on the divorce papers without even looking at the terms. Ethan frowned and asked, I curled my lips into a faint smile but said nothing. He had left almost all his assets to me, just for Bella White, to repay a single life-saving act. Make time to go to the Civil Affairs office tomorrow and finalize the paperwork. All right, I responded. Ethan hesitated for a brief moment as he held the signed agreement. A flicker of confusion flashing through his eyes. But he said nothing in the end. As they left, Bella turned back and shot me a cold, triumphant smile. Without speaking, she mouthed the words, "I won." But so what? I had already lost an entire lifetime once before. This time, I was walking away from the fight. Not long after, my phone lit up with a message from Ethan. "I'm sorry, Sophia. Once this is over, we can start over again. If it hadn't been for Logan pushing me away that day, I would have been the one to die on set. I was only fulfilling his last wish, taking care of his fiancée. You understand, don't you?" Staring at his message, I couldn't help but laugh. And yet, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It was the same in my past life. To force me into a divorce. Ethan had gotten drunk one night while discussing his plan with his best friend. But what he didn't know was that this friend of his was also close to me. Noah Shaw had tried to talk sense into Ethan, urging him not to destroy his marriage over Bella. And at the same time, he had come to persuade me, telling me that Ethan was a man who valued loyalty and honor above all else. If it hadn't been for Bella's fiancé pushing Ethan out of the way and taking that explosion for him, Ethan wouldn't have everything he has today. Back then, through my tears, I had asked Ethan, "There are so many ways to repay a debt. Why does it have to be divorce?" Noah fell silent. He had asked Ethan the same question before. And Ethan's response? "Bella lost her fiancé. I have to give her emotional support and help her survive this. I've already given Sophia enough love over the years. If I give her a little less now, it won't matter. Because he loved her, so he sacrificed me." How absurd. Fortunately, fate had given me a second chance. Whenever it came to Bella, Ethan never wasted time. That very morning, he had just signed the divorce papers at my place. And by nightfall, he had already arranged a press conference and sent an assistant to invite me to attend. I hadn't even spoken yet when the assistant, noticing my silence, quickly relayed Ethan's exact words. "Miss Sophia, it would be best for you to attend this press conference. Not for Ethan's sake, but for your own reputation." I was momentarily stunned. Then, I let out a cold laugh. Ethan was threatening me again. He wanted to use public pressure to corner me, just like last time, smearing my name, forcing me to drown under waves of online abuse, leaving me with no choice but to submit. I could never understand. Did he see me as his wife? Or as his enemy? Since he wanted to make our separation public, then I would play along. The press conference was held at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, the most luxurious venue in the capital. The attendees were the most influential journalists in the industry. When Bella entered, dressed in a flowing white gown, arm in arm with Ethan, the reporters swarmed toward them instantly. Ethan instinctively moved to shield Bella, his voice calm and gentle as he spoke. "I'll answer all your questions in a moment. Please, step back for now." His tone was soft, reassuring. As he lifted his head, his gaze met mine across the room. Just for a second, for some foolish reason, I still harbored the ridiculous hope that he would also step in to help me, to protect me from the relentless reporters closing in. But in the very next moment, he looked away as if he hadn't even seen me. Smiling slightly, he led Bella onto the stage, completely unfazed, as if I didn't exist. I let out a mocking laugh. The reporter closest to me seemed new to the field, nervously shoving a microphone toward me. "Miss Sophia, are you really divorcing Ethan Carter?" "Yes." I smiled and nodded. The young journalist looked at me in shock. "But you and Ethan have been together since college. You've been in love for so many years. Even after getting married, you seemed so happy together. Just last month, Ethan even bought you a limited edition jewelry set." I maintained my smile, but the warmth in my eyes had long since faded. That jewelry was something he owed me. He had missed our wedding anniversary just to take Bella White to an amusement park. And that gift? It was nothing in comparison. In my past life, I had foolishly been delighted by it, only to later discover that the whole idea had come from Noah Shaw. The necklace? It was chosen by Ethan's assistant. He hadn't even known what it looked like. "Do you still love Ethan Carter?" the young reporter asked hesitantly, his nervous gaze fixed on me. The crowd of journalists suddenly fell silent. Even Ethan, standing on stage, looked over in my direction. His brows furrowed slightly, waiting for my answer. I met his gaze indifferently, curled my lips into a faint smile, and said, "No, I don't love him anymore." Before the press conference had even ended, I left. That night, Ethan Carter publicly announced that our marriage had been over for 6 months. Overnight, I became the abandoned ex-wife, while Bella was painted as the innocent victim of this entire ordeal. The video of that press conference went viral across social media. It trended at the top for an entire week. Particularly, Ethan's words spread like wildfire. Sophia and I had already decided to part ways 6 months ago. We were simply waiting for the right time to announce it. We had intended to handle this privately. But now that public opinion has dragged an innocent person into the situation, I must step forward to clarify. Bella is not a third party. She was entrusted to me by my best friend before he passed away. Taking care of her is my responsibility. I hope everyone will remain rational and not jump to conclusions. Public opinion immediately turned against me. People criticized me for being petty, for not even being able to tolerate a poor girl who had lost her fiancé. They said I wasn't worthy of a man as loyal and righteous as Ethan Carter. That after years of marriage, I had failed to learn his kindness. The backlash lasted for a long time. I became the perfect target for people to attack. After finalizing the divorce, I stepped out of the civil affairs office. Ethan called after me, "Don't let the online comments get to you. The noise will die down after a while." I stopped walking and let out a quiet laugh. It was funny. Why was there such a stark difference in how we were treated under public scrutiny? "Sophia, once this all blows over, we can start over again, okay?" He took a step closer. But I stepped back. My gaze landed on the paparazzi in the distance. Their cameras trained on us. Ethan also noticed the situation and hesitated, stopping in place. "I'm going back to Jackson City," I said. "You haven't been back home in so long. I'll come pick you up for New Year's." "I won't be coming back," I interrupted him calmly. The warm smile on his face froze. A flicker of panic flashed through his eyes. I continued, "When I agreed to sign the divorce papers, you promised me one condition. It's time to fulfill it." Ethan stared at me in shock. From the moment I was reborn, I had only needed a few seconds to sort through all my emotions. Both love and hatred for him. When I first saw the divorce agreement, I had considered tearing it up and causing a scene. But in the end, reason prevailed over impulse. I met his gaze and smiled. "Ethan, from now on, let's just be strangers." With that, I turned and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan stood frozen in place, unable to react for a long time. A wave of unease surged in his chest, as if he was about to lose something irreplaceable. It was the same unsettling feeling he had when Sophia had calmly signed the divorce papers. She hadn't broken down. It was as if she had seen this ending coming from the very start. Yet not long ago, she had been furious at him for forgetting their anniversary. He had been certain that the moment he brought up a fake divorce, Sophia would fight against it with everything she had. He had even prepared a strategy to handle her reaction. But instead, she had surprised him. She had been too calm. So calm that when she picked up the pen to sign, she had looked utterly indifferent, like still water. For a moment, he had almost wanted to stop her. But in the end, he did nothing. He had reassured himself that it didn't matter. Sophia loved him so much. Once the scandal died down, they could get back together. He would make it up to her then. But Bella was different. He couldn't let anything happen to her. If it weren't for Logan Reed pushing him out of the way and taking the explosion for him that day, he wouldn't even be alive right now. Before Logan died, he had begged Ethan to take care of Bella. He couldn't be an ungrateful man. Noah Shaw had once asked him, if both Bella and Sophia were trapped in a fire at the same time, who would you save? Ethan had laughed at the question, dismissing it as childish. "Of course, I'd save Bella," he had answered, "and then I'd die together with Sophia." Noah had laughed too, but then he pressed further. "And what if Sophia doesn't want to die? You can't just take advantage of her love for you and keep making her endure everything. If someone can't feel love, they'll eventually lose hope." Back then, Ethan hadn't taken those words seriously. He had tossed aside Noah's warning without a second thought. Yet in the end, reality proved Noah right. Late at night, Ethan drove toward the luxury apartment. Since their marriage, Sophia had always lived here. She was a genius pianist. At 10 years old, she had been hailed as a musical prodigy after playing a Mozart piece flawlessly. Everyone had said she would become a legendary master in the world of classical music. And they had been right. But after she got married, something changed. Her music lost its soul. Her mentor had tried to guide her, but nothing seemed to help. Eventually, she stopped playing altogether. She wouldn't even touch the piano. Ethan stepped into the music room. The moment he heard the melody, he froze. The music was soft yet deeply moving, filling the air with an intoxicating beauty. The housekeeper heard it too and walked in. When she saw Ethan, she hesitated before speaking. "Sir," she asked, "when did Mrs. Carter record this piece?" Ethan was silent for a moment before answering. "The day I brought Bella back here." The housekeeper nodded. Ethan wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. Leaving the music room, he returned to their bedroom. He had always told himself this was just a temporary divorce. Once the scandal died down, everything would go back to how it was before. Yet for some reason, his heart felt empty. Sophia's words from earlier kept replaying in his mind. He brushed them off as nothing more than angry, impulsive remarks. This place was still their home. She would come back. Knock, knock. The soft sound of someone tapping on the master bedroom door pulled him from his thoughts. Ethan looked up. It was Bella. She stood at the doorway, wearing a thin nightgown. A faint blush colored her cheeks as she gazed at him quietly. "It's late. What is it?" he asked. Bella bit her lip. "The paparazzi found out where I live. They've been waiting outside my building all night. Can I stay here for now?" Her voice wavered slightly, her eyes flickering with hesitation. "I don't want to be a bother." Ethan frowned but eventually said, "It's fine. It's late. I'll have the housekeeper prepare a guest room for you." He was about to call for the housekeeper when Bella suddenly stepped inside. Her big, watery eyes locked onto his. "Ethan, I don't want to stay in the guest room. Can I stay here instead?" she asked softly. Ethan's frown deepened. He was about to refuse when he noticed the redness in her eyes. In the end, his heart softened. The plane landed in Jackson City, and James Hale was there to pick me up. Years ago, when he first entered the industry, he had been falsely accused of harassment by a female celebrity. The scandal had nearly ended his career before it even began. Because of that, no agency had dared to sign him. I had met him at a charity concert. He had sat alone in a corner, never speaking to anyone. Whenever someone approached him, he would instinctively pull away. Then one late night, I was surrounded by paparazzi and nearly got into trouble. By sheer coincidence, James had been passing by. I thought he would just walk away, pretend not to see, but without hesitation, he had stepped forward. That night, I had asked him, "What if I accused you too?" He had let out a helpless smile. "Whatever fate decides." I accepted it. I had used my family's resources to clear his name. The day the truth came to light, James Hale had stood across the crowd, eyes red, and bowed deeply to me. That storm had not extinguished his kindness. Through his exceptional acting skills and relentless hard work, he had now become one of the most sought-after stars in the industry. "Sophia, long time no see." James, dressed casually, took my luggage from me. I nodded, my nose stinging slightly. After marrying Ethan Carter, I had followed him north to help him expand his career. In my past life, when I passed away, James had been filming in the mountains. Until the very end, I never got to see him one last time. "Are you planning to settle down in Jackson City this time?" he asked carefully. "I'm not leaving again." James smiled. "Chairman Sue knows you're back. He's really happy." I froze. My fingers clenched inside my coat pocket as a wave of bitterness spread through me. Back then, when my divorce from Ethan had become the talk of the town, my father had been heartbroken seeing me suffer. That very night, he had flown from Jackson City to the capital, spending hours trying to talk sense into me. "Ethan is too selfish. He wants to repay a life-saving favor. But why does that mean you have to sacrifice your entire life for it? This isn't gratitude, it's moral coercion. Why should you be the one to pay the price? Sophia, divorce him. He doesn't deserve you." He had wanted to take me back home, but I had refused. I had cried and begged to stay, insisting that I loved Ethan and that I didn't want a divorce. Why should I be the one to make way for his guilt? "Even if it kills me, I won't leave." I didn't go. In the end, my father had collapsed from a heart attack and was rushed to the ICU. He was issued critical condition notices multiple times. Overnight, my mother's hair turned completely white. When my father finally woke up, he didn't say anything, but I knew I had disappointed him. Even as my mother left the hospital, she had tried to persuade me one last time. Your father has never interfered with your decisions, but Ethan is not the right man for you. Blinded by love, I hadn't listened to a word of it. It had taken losing everything, even my life, to finally wake up. To Ethan Carter, I was never as important as I thought. How are they now? I asked James. He nodded. The company is doing well, and your parents are both in good health. I smiled slightly, looking into his clear eyes. Thank you, James. Thank you for taking care of them in my place. James shook his head. It was the least I could do. Years ago, if my father and I hadn't pulled him out of that crisis, he might have disappeared from the entertainment industry forever. Meanwhile, social media continued to churn out new headlines. What started as Bella White being a homewrecker had now shifted to Sophia Sue is a heartless woman. The media had captured photos of me and James at the airport, twisting the narrative to claim that I had been having an affair long before my marriage ended. I couldn't help but laugh. As I lowered my head, my phone screen lit up. It was a message from Bella, sent from a burner account. Attached was a photo of her inside my marital home, spending the night there. Last night, Ethan personally asked me to stay over. Take a guess. What do you think he'll do tonight? Ethan has such a strong sense of morality, now that there's nothing in his way. Sophia, your husband is mine. She was trying to provoke me, but my heart remained completely still. James poured me a cup of tea, glancing at my phone with concern. His voice was heavy with anger. Sophia, you don't have to endure this. I will make sure you get justice. I didn't respond to his words. Instead, I changed the subject. I heard my father has been introducing you to some eligible women from prominent families. But you keep turning them down? James seemed caught off guard by my bluntness. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. After a long silence, I asked again, is it because of me? His head snapped up, our eyes meeting for a brief moment before he quickly looked away. Over the years, even though James and I hadn't seen each other, every year on my birthday, I would receive a carefully prepared gift from him. And no matter how many times I declined, he never gave up. I finally couldn't hold back anymore and dialed his number. For the first time, I truly lost my temper. James, let's settle this once and for all. I helped you once, and you repaid me once. We owe each other nothing. It was my father who helped you return to the entertainment industry. Everything you have today is because of your own talent and hard work. I don't need you to repay me, but if you keep doing this, you'll only make Ethan misunderstand our relationship. After that night, James never sent me another gift. James, I told you, you don't owe me anything. Before I could finish speaking, James interrupted me softly. That's not what this is about. What do you mean? I looked at him, only to see a gentle smile curl at his lips. His eyes were filled with deep emotion. I like you, Sophia. I know I'm not good enough for you. I never dared to hope that you'd ever see me that way. But my feelings for you are real, and I don't want to lie to myself anymore. James finished speaking, and I quietly studied him. The first time I met him, he had been withdrawn and insecure. Now, he was one of the most sought-after stars in the industry. My father's most valued artist. Last night, when I returned to the old house, my father and I had talked for a long time. We discussed the company's future, and my future. Before I left, he asked me 2 questions. The first was, do you still love Ethan? I shook my head without hesitation. But when he asked the second question, I fell silent. Have you ever considered James? My father had already planned to step back from running the company. Even though he had personally mentored James and brought him to where he was today, James was not truly one of our own. The question that had troubled me for so long suddenly became clear. Should I be with James? 2 days later, in the capital, Ethan sat in the music room, staring at the video of Sophia Su's interview with Yuki. The reporter had curiously asked her, do you still love Mr. Carter? Sophia had smiled and answered, no, I don't. Just 3 simple words. And yet, they left his chest feeling unbearably tight. He had replayed that video countless times, desperately searching for any hint of hesitation in her expression. But he found nothing. Irritated, he opened their old chat history. The last message she had sent was a simple reminder, don't forget the divorce paperwork at the Civil Affairs office. and he had only replied with one word, okay. Once upon a time, Sophia had been inseparable from him, sharing every little detail of her life. Whenever she messaged him, he would respond immediately. He scrolled through their conversations. At some point, her texts had become one-sided. She had talked to him, and he had replied with short, dismissive phrases. Got it. Understood. His schedule had been packed, filled with filming, endorsements, and events. Bella's fiancé's sudden death had left her emotionally devastated. She had attempted suicide multiple times. Ethan had been overwhelmed. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A new message popped up. Sophia is marrying James Hale. Ethan shot up from his seat, knocking over the piano's music stand. Sheet music scattered everywhere. As he rushed to pick them up, a medical report slipped out from the pile. For a moment, he was stunned. His hands trembled as he scanned through the document. The patient has developed a tumor in the chest due to prolonged emotional distress. Immediate surgery is recommended. At the bottom, the date of the diagnosis. The very same day he had suggested a fake divorce. His chest tightened painfully. Ethan, what's wrong? Bella's voice came from behind him. She had heard the noise and hurried in from the master bedroom. Her eyes flickered as she caught sight of the report in his hands. Can I see it? She asked softly. Ethan remained silent, his entire body tense with an unbearable pressure in his chest. Bella took the report from his hands, casually flipping through the pages before patting his shoulder with a lighthearted smile. Don't worry, Ethan. I saw Sophia the other day. She looked perfectly fine, full of energy, not at all like a sick person. She was probably just so mad at you that she used this diagnosis to deceive you. Her gaze lingered on him expectantly. Before she could say anything more, Ethan forcefully took the medical report from her hands. His emotions barely contained, he took a few steps toward the door, then suddenly stopped and turned back. Starting tomorrow, don't stay in the master bedroom anymore, he said. If Sophia finds out, she'll be upset. Bella stood frozen in place. By the time she came back to her senses and tried to chase after him, Ethan had already rushed downstairs, not even bothering to grab his coat. It didn't matter whether the diagnosis was real or not. It didn't matter whether Sophia was really going to marry James. Right now, all he wanted was to see her. Bring her home. James took our wedding very seriously. He personally handled every little detail. During the day, he was busy filming, yet he still made time to visit the venue. At night, he sat in the dressing room, carefully selecting wedding dresses and tuxedos. You don't have to do all of this yourself, I said, standing by the door with a coat draped over my shoulders. You've been filming all day. You must be exhausted. He put down his phone and turned to me with a soft smile. I want to prepare everything for you myself, he said. I know you might not have feelings for me, but you will always be the most important person to me. Something rippled in my heart at the warmth in his gaze. You don't need to feel any pressure, he continued. Just focus on being the most beautiful bride. James's voice was gentle, and the deep affection in his eyes was undeniable. I nodded slightly, the corners of my lips curling into a faint smile. But I never expected Ethan Carter to suddenly show up on set. I had just finished checking on James when I saw him standing outside. His perfectly tailored suit was slightly disheveled, and his face was terrifyingly pale. His usually sharp eyes looked dull and lifeless. His gaze lingered on James's hand holding mine for a brief moment before he quickly looked away. Ethan forced a smile. Sophia, I've come to take you home. Let's get remarried, okay? As he spoke, he took a step forward. James instinctively tried to stand in front of me, but I stopped him. I gently straightened his clothes and said softly, go wait for me in the car. You still have a shoot tonight. I won't take long. James looked down at me, the corners of his lips lifting slightly. All right, he shot Ethan a glance, calm, indifferent, before turning and walking away. Now, it was just me and Ethan. He tried to step closer, but I quietly took a few steps back. Mr. Carter, I think it's best if we keep our distance, I said in a soft voice. If the media catches this, it won't look good for either of us. The headlines will claim I'm a woman who can't move on from her ex-husband. Public opinion is always harsher on women, just like it was for Bella. Even though you were the one who made the choice, I ended up being labeled as petty and vindictive. Ethan's eyes dimmed, and he let out a bitter laugh. I've already asked my PR team to handle everything. I'm sorry, Sophia. I never meant for you to suffer like this. I didn't know things would turn out this way. I met his gaze, my tone steady. You knew, Ethan. You knew exactly what would happen. If he hadn't known how cruel public opinion could be, he wouldn't have pushed me into divorcing him just to protect Bella. In my past life, when I was falsely accused of cheating and forced into a divorce, my career collapsed overnight. Strangers whispered behind my back. Some even mocked me to my face. Sophia, after everything your ex-husband put you through, how do you still have the nerve to be alive? Someone sneered once. If I were you, I'd have jumped off a building already. And you call yourself a pianist? Ethan never spared me a second thought. If I truly mattered to him, he wouldn't have driven me to ruin. Night after night, I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the city lights. Unable to sleep, I destroyed my piano room. I burned everything he had ever given me, foolishly hoping to erase every trace of my past. I let out all of my anger, my grief. I couldn't understand. How could the person who once cherished me the most be the one to push me into the abyss? In the end, I ended my life. To this day, I still remember what it felt like as my consciousness faded away. Ethan opened his mouth as if he wanted to explain something, but no words came out. He lowered his head, looking like a child who had made a terrible mistake. Sophia, I'll make it up to you. I couldn't help but laugh. I'd heard those words too many times before. The day Bella White's fiancé passed away, Ethan Carter had promised to take care of her. From that moment on, she became his priority in everything. On our wedding day, Bella had attempted suicide. Ethan dropped me off at the hotel, then disappeared for the entire night. That was when I first wavered, wondering if this relationship was worth continuing. But when I saw how exhausted he looked, I convinced myself to endure it. I loved him, and I was willing to stand by him through all his hardships. Yet every broken promise ended with the same empty words. Sophia, I'll make it up to you later. Ethan always thought we had all the time in the world. But he forgot that love erodes with every wound inflicted. By the end of my past life, I could no longer tell whether I loved him or if I was just clinging to an obsession. I smirked coldly. Ethan, my expectations were never high to begin with. And yet, even the bare minimum was too much for you. I was raised in a family that cherished me, loved me. Why should I be trampled on by you? So let's end this once and for all. As soon as I finished speaking, I turned to leave. Panic flashed across Ethan's face. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His tall frame trembled slightly, his pale lips quivering. No, he choked out. I don't agree. This can't end like this. Sophia, you're my wife. You can't leave me. His voice was thick with emotion, almost pleading. I let out a mocking laugh and yanked my hand free. We're already divorced. Ethan, you were the one who forced me to sign the papers. You were the one who threatened me into attending that press conference. You were the one who made sure I walked into that civil affairs office to finalize it. You did all of that yourself. Don't try to deny it now. Ethan was speechless. I turned away, intending to leave, but then glanced toward someone standing behind him. Mr. Carter, shouldn't you be with Miss White? The two of you make a perfect pair. His face instantly turned deathly pale. He had rushed back from the film set in the middle of the night after his assistant found out where I was. He hadn't even taken off his makeup before running here. But when he arrived, he saw me and James Hale smiling as we discussed the details of our wedding. His steps slowed. He simply stood there, watching from outside the set. At some point, he realized, it had been a long time since he had last seen me smile like that. Every time we met in the past, we ended up fighting over Bella. He had started canceling our dates, always claiming he was busy with filming or tied up with late-night meetings with his manager. In that moment, he finally understood. Every word I had said at the civil affairs office was the truth. I really didn't want him anymore. But he couldn't accept it. For a split second, he wanted to charge forward and punch James, to warn him not to covet his ex-wife. Yet, after hesitating for a long time, he didn't take that step. He was afraid of making me angry. Ethan, Bella's voice pulled him out of his daze. She tugged at his sleeve, her voice soft. Sophia has been gone for a long time now. Ethan looked down at her, his voice hoarse. Why are you here? Bella hesitated. I heard Sophia was getting married, and I was worried you'd be upset. So I came to check on you. She spoke gently and then reached out, trying to hug him. But Ethan frowned and pressed a hand against her shoulder. stopping her. Bella's eyes instantly turned red. Ethan, Sophia doesn't want you anymore. I do. Let's be together, okay? Ethan had always indulged her. She had thought that after my divorce, she would naturally take my place and become Mrs. Carter. But at this moment, Ethan's face turned ice cold. Bella, do you even know what you're saying? I do. Ethan, I love you. For the first time, she confessed her feelings directly. But Ethan only let out a bitter laugh. And before he knew it, tears slipped from his eyes. His manager had warned him countless times. Bella looks at you differently. Ethan, if you don't want to ruin your marriage, you should keep your distance. You're too soft-hearted. You can't see what she really wants. Stay away from her before she destroys what you have with Sophia. But he had never taken those warnings seriously. And now, he was paying the price. The entertainment industry was a glass house. Secrets never stayed hidden for long. Any small disturbance could spread like wildfire overnight. On the third day after Ethan had come looking for me, James sent him an email containing irrefutable evidence that Bella had faked her medical records. Along with it, he compiled a timeline of every single instance over the years where Ethan had chosen Bella over me. That entire record was released online. By the next morning, the internet was in complete chaos. But none of it had anything to do with me anymore. Some people said that Bella White deliberately sabotaged my marriage with Ethan Carter, pushing us to the brink of divorce. Others said that Ethan was a hypocrite. If he truly wanted to repay the debt to Bella's late fiancé, why did that repayment end up in his bed? Why did he have to hurt his own wife to the point where she lost all hope and chose to walk away? Ethan's reputation collapsed. His new drama was put on indefinite hold. Not long after, I exposed the evidence that Bella had secretly hired fake accounts to slander me as the homewrecker. Online public opinion spiraled out of control. Ethan, overwhelmed and exhausted, initially planned to send Bella abroad to lay low. But after seeing the evidence, he snapped. On set, in front of the entire crew, he grabbed Bella by the throat. Why did you do this? He demanded. At first, she tried to play the victim. But as her air supply dwindled and her face turned red, she suddenly burst into manic laughter. Then, she admitted everything. I just wanted to be Mrs. Carter. I wanted to force Sophia to divorce you. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself. If you had truly loved Sophia, I never would have had a chance. Ethan coughed up blood and collapsed on the spot, unconscious. A bystander caught the entire scene on video, and it spread across the internet like wildfire. His production was shut down indefinitely. When he woke up, he was so emotionally unstable that his company had no choice but to freeze his career. Meanwhile, Bella's reputation was utterly destroyed. She had no choice but to flee the country. But fate was cruel. On the way to the airport, her car crashed. She died instantly. On my wedding day, James Hale prepared an extravagant ceremony for me. The entire event was grand and spectacular. Fireworks illuminated the night sky, and all eyes were on us. When a guest commented that marrying James was a blessing from a past life, James immediately had them thrown out of the venue with a cold expression. And when we exchanged vows, he solemnly declared, "From this day forward, I belong to the Sue family, body and soul." James knew that a part of me still carried the shadow of Ethan. But he never wavered in his devotion. On our wedding night, he held me tightly in his arms. His embrace so strong that it felt like he wanted to fuse me into his very bones. It wasn't until I pressed him for answers that I found out. Ethan Carter had taken his own life. In his final moments, he had a brief period of clarity. He mailed me something, the forgotten medical report I had left in the piano room. I stared at the divorce agreement on the coffee table. His handwriting stretched across the pages, each word dripping with regret. He wrote that he had a nightmare. In that dream, he had forced me to divorce him. When I refused, he framed me, pushed me into a scandal, and left me no way out. In the dream, I was driven to the point of suicide. He said that in the dream, he had only wanted to push me into divorcing him. He had never meant to push me to death. He also said he had never known I was truly sick. If I had known, I would have never hurt you like that. When I saw you lying in the emergency room, covered in blood, my heart shattered. I wished it had been me on that operating table instead. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Fortunately, it was all just a dream." And the very last sentence, "Please, forgive me." I let out a cold, emotionless laugh. Without hesitation, I tossed both the letter and the medical report into the shredder, watching them turn into tiny pieces of confetti. Madam, James furrowed his brows slightly. I spoke softly but firmly. The Sophia Sue of the past was indeed sick. But I am not that person anymore. After leaving the one who hurt me, I have healed. For a long while, James was silent. Then, he smiled, indulgent and affectionate, yet tinged with a trace of heartache. I looked up at him and smiled as well. For the first time, I truly felt at peace. I was grateful that in this lifetime, I had finally found my best ending.